Hello and welcome to the BA Knowledge Share. In this episode, we go over the fourth task in the Plan and Monitor Chapter 3 of the BABOK Guide. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, this is the fourth task in this chapter, and we go over the Plan Business Analysis Information Management. What is the purpose of this? The purpose of Plan Business Analysis Information Management is to develop an approach or how business analysis information will be stored and accessed. Now, business analysis information is comprised of all the information business analysts elicit, create, compile, and disseminate in the course of performing business analysis. Models, scope statements, stakeholder concerns, elicitation results, requirements, designs, and solution options are just a few examples. This includes requirements and designs, from lightweight user stories to formal requirement documents to functioning prototypes. Information management entails identifying how information should be organized, the level of detail at which information should be captured, any relationship between the information, how information may be used across multiple initiatives and throughout the enterprise, how information should be accessed and stored, and the characteristics about the information that must be maintained. Information management also helps ensure that the business analysis information is organized in a functional and useful manner, is easily accessible to appropriate personnel, and is stored to the necessary length of time. Some of the elements of this task are organization of business analysis information. So you as a business analyst are responsible for organizing business analysis information in a manner that allows for efficient access and use. Information must be well structured to ensure it is not difficult to locate, conflicts with other information, or is needlessly duplicated. The business analyst determines how best to structure and organize the business analysis information at the start of an initiative. This involves taking into consideration the type and the amount of information to be collected, the stakeholders' access and usage needs, and the size and complexity of the change. Relationships among the types of information must be defined to assist in managing the effect of new or changed information in the future. The level of abstraction. The level of abstraction describes the breadth and depth of the information being provided. Representations of information may range from highly conceptual or summarized to very detailed. In determining how much detail each stakeholder may require as the initiative evolves, consideration is given to the needs of the stakeholders, the complexity of what is being explained, and the importance of the change. Rather than present the same information to all stakeholders, business analysts should present information with appropriate breadth and level of detail based on each stakeholder's role. Business analysis information regarding a topic of significant importance or high level of risk is frequently represented in greater detail. Now, the three is the plan traceability approach. The traceability approach is based on the complexity of the domain, the number of views of requirements that will be produced, any requirement-related risks, organizational standards, applicable regulatory requirements, and an understanding of costs and benefits involved with tracing. Business analysts plan to ensure the approach is at a level of detail to add value without excessive overhead. The fourth element is plan for requirements reuse. Reusing requirements can save an organization time, effort, and cost, provided the requirements are accessible and structured in a manner that supports their reuse. Requirements that are potential candidates for long-term use are those an organization must meet on an ongoing basis, such as regulatory requirements, contractual obligations, quality standards, service level agreements, business rules, business processes, or requirements describing products the enterprise produces. Storage and access. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but really understanding how long certain artifacts need to be stored, what sort of decisions need to be made around storage of that information. So those need to be determined as part of this task. Requirements, attributes. This is important because you want to understand what are the attributes to a specific requirement. And when we say attributes, it's literally what are the data elements that just define a requirement. For instance, an absolute reference, and the author, the complexity, the ownership, the priority, the risks, the source, the stability, and the urgency. So urgency could be high, medium, low. Stability would be, is it stable, is it not stable? Status is this proposed, is this accepted? You always want to identify the source. Where is it coming from? Whether it's from subject matter expert one, subject matter expert two. So there's that sort of traceability going back. So that's an important element to consider. A couple of guidelines and tools to consider here are the business analysis performance assessment, which provides the results of previous assessments that should be reviewed and incorporated into all planning approaches. Business policies define the limits within which decisions must be made. They may be described by regulations, contracts, agreements, warranties, certifications, or other legal obligations. Information management tools. Each organization uses some tools to store, retrieve, and share business analysis information. So these may be as simple as a whiteboard, or it could be anything like Confluence or Jira. So those are the items that need to be considered when performing this task. Then you have the legal regulatory information, which describes legislative rules or regulations that must be followed and helps determine how business analysis information will be managed. For instance, and within the healthcare industry, it could be heavily regulated around in terms of how information is stored. So that's something to consider when you are performing this task. Some of the techniques used here are brainstorming, interviews, item tracking, lessons learned, mind mapping, process modeling, surveying or questionnaire, as well as workshops. So those are some of the techniques that can be used over here. There are just 3 stakeholders involved in this area, where you have the domain subject matter expert that may need access and work with business analysis information, and will be interested in a more specific view of business analysis information, which relates to the area of expertise. The regulator may define rules and processes related to information management. So in this case, it could be someone in the healthcare industry. It could be some sort of regulation or a HIPAA regulation that you need to be aware of in terms of managing information. Sponsor reviews, comments on, and approves business analysis information. Now, we've been kind of going through the case study of Amanda, how she's been hired or assigned to a project to move the restaurant's business online. So she's kind of responsible for understanding, gathering those requirements. So let's break it down as to what she does exactly in terms of planned business analysis information. Now, she essentially undertakes this task to develop an approach on how business analysis information will be shared and accessed. What she does is she organizes the business analysis information. She determines the level of abstraction, whether it needs to be at a high level or whether it needs to get to that level of detail. Something to keep in mind for her is that business analysis information regarding a topic of significant importance or high level of risk is frequently represented in greater detail. So she has to make that determination if she needs to get into the level of detail or into the weeds of the details. She plans a traceability approach in this area in the sense of, well, how should she go about understanding the complexity of the domain, the number of views of requirements, and other sort of points under this element. She also plans for requirements reuse, so she understands the what sort of regulatory requirements are there. Are there any sort of service level agreements? How should she construct the requirements so that they are generic enough so that they can be reused by the organization? So she takes that into consideration. She also takes into consideration storage and access. Because this is a restaurant business and this is a regular business, she inquires as to whether there's any sort of regulatory requirements that she needs to be aware of in terms of storing information so that the business can access that information down the road for any reason. Requirements attributes. So she kind of makes a grid of the requirement and any sort of attributes associated with that requirement. Example is who's the author of that requirement, what is the level of complexity of that requirement, the priority, the ownership, and other attributes that she thinks is relevant for that. Then she considers a couple of guidelines and tools like business analysis performance assessment, business policies, information management, and legal and regulatory information. She uses a couple of techniques like brainstorming, interviews, item tracking, and the couple here in order to undertake this task. She works with Tim, the domain subject matter expert, as he's very interested in understanding where this documentation will be stored, how he can access this information. She works with the health regulator and someone from compliance in that business to understand what sort of rules guide the storage of the information. She also works with the sponsor who reviews, comments on, and approves the business analysis information. So those are the sorts of efforts that she undertakes for this. And before that, let's get into a little bit into the inputs and the outputs. In this case, she uses the business analysis approach and the performance objectives as her inputs. And she basically, I apologize. So she uses business analysis approach, the stakeholder engagement approach, and the governance approach as the input. And then she creates an output of information management approach. So the inputs are three: business analysis approach, stakeholder engagement approach, and the governance approach. And the outputs are information management approach. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please do subscribe to this channel and do visit our website at baknowledgeshare.com. Until next time, see you then.